Welcome to Reading the Bible Together and to Genesis chapter 3, where an otherwise unidentified and unexplained serpent leads the woman into a conversation about God. That's an important starting point. Have you ever been in the same room with some people and they start talking about you? You know what the problem with Doug is, I'll hear them say, and they're standing right in front of me. Suddenly I feel as though I don't even exist, as though I've dropped through a hole in the floor, as though I've become an inanimate object like a lamp or a carpet or the ashtray. When people talk about you and not to you, you become depersonalized. You become an object. But this is what the serpent does with God. The first thing the serpent does is lead the woman into a discussion about God. And God ceases to be a person, ceases to be there in their midst. God is reduced to a concept like the theory of relativity or black holes. God becomes a hypothesis. God, for all intents and purposes of the conversation, is gone. Now, our society, our world has done a marvelous job of just that. God has become for us a theory, a hypothesis, a what if. We don't have the sense of God being intimately involved in our lives, our loves, our sorrows, our fears. Instead, God is out there. We think about God when we want to. God's involved in our lives only when we let him. God is involved in our world only when we choose, and then only from a distance. We've bought the message of the serpent. We've fallen into the trap. We've traded intimate relationship for theory. And so we're left alone and afraid because the way we talk about God, God is gone. Well, now that the stage has been set, now that the serpent has cut us off from the reality of God, he introduces the first of the 3 steps of temptation. We talked about this in a recent sermon here at Zion. Read what he says. Did God say you shall not eat from any tree in the garden? The woman said to the serpent, we may eat of the fruit of the trees in the garden, but God said, you shall not eat of the fruit of the tree that is in the middle of the garden, nor shall you touch it, or you shall die. Now, the implication in bright red letters is this, that God is forbidding you something you want. God is actually the one tempting, and the punishment is death. God is denying you your natural desires. God is playing unreasonable games, making you live by rules. God is vindictive, spiteful, unfair, and mean. He stands between us and a good time. God is not good, implies the serpent. His punishments do not fit the crime. God is not good. We look at the 10 Commandments, we listen to the teachings of Jesus, teachings of love and mutual concern, and we don't see a blessing or a guide to what will be a fuller and happier life. No, we see rules and regulations, and we shout, I gotta be me, I gotta be free, and we do our own thing. This seems to start when we're about 2.5 years old. And if anyone is a parent of any worth whatsoever, they're going to respond to that drive of independence with a watchful eye and a set of rules and a careful explanation of the consequences of actually poking your sister in the eye with a fork, which seemed a reasonable enough action to the 2.5-year-old. But deep down inside of us is a 2.5-year-old still just itching to get out, to make our own rules, and we live in a world which is reaping the benefit of just such a problem. God is not good. We know what's good. God does not know. We know. That's what the serpent's lie is all about. And now the second step. That's not true. You will not die, the serpent says to the woman. God is not serious. God does not mean what God says. We can do what we please. We can live as we like. There will be no consequences to our actions. After all, lies the serpent, God is not serious. God's a doting old grandfather with a terminal soft spot for us, so no matter how we cheat and carouse and have a good laugh behind the old man's back, still he welcomes us as though nothing has ever gone wrong. God is not serious, and so we're not serious either, and we look upon the commands as helpful advice, but otherwise we live as we please. We will love our neighbor when it's convenient. We will worship God when it's convenient. We will sin when that's convenient, because, says the serpent, God is not serious. After all, we tell ourselves, having bought the lie, there are no consequences to our actions. The first 2 lies then, God is not good, God is not serious. Step number 3 may surprise you, but it is this. The serpent lies and says God is jealous. God is threatened by us. For God knows that when you eat of it, your eyes will be opened and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. God, says the serpent, is like a petty little ruler without whom we could do fine, or better even. We don't need God, and God is terrified of us finding that out. We don't want to be seen as created by anyone or anything. We're no one's creature. We only want to slip the bounds of creaturehood. We want to lay out our own rules, our own future. We want nothing to do with God or any plan or any purpose or any destiny. We want to satisfy ourselves to be our own gods, our own judge and jury. God, says the serpent, wants to keep us in a box. So, the stage has been set. The serpent has reduced God to a philosophical point, something to be talked about rather than someone right there, right here. The serpent has then introduced 3 steps, 3 lies to undermine this philosophical God. That God is not good, God is not serious, God is jealous. Or to put it another way, God does not want what we know is best for us, doesn't mean what he says, and resents our ability to go ahead and do it anyway. Now, as a result of these lies, an interesting change in perspective happens for the woman. Remember that she'd gone even further than God in the prohibition regarding the fruit. She'd insisted that not only mustn't you eat the fruit, you mustn't even touch it or you would die. But now listen what happens as a result of the lies and the successful temptation. When the woman saw that the tree was good for food, that it was a delight to the eyes, that the tree was to be desired to make one wise, she took of its fruit and ate. All of a sudden, any consideration of what's right or wrong as far as God is concerned is inconsequential. Now there's only the innate attraction of the sin itself and all the inherent rationalizations. Suddenly the forbidden fruit is good for you. It's a well-balanced, all-natural and nutritious meal. Suddenly it's beautiful to look at. And how can anything beautiful be bad? Finally, it would also provide a desirable gain in wisdom, and any learning experience must be positive. What an amazing transformation in just a handful of verses. That which was wrong and deadly is suddenly nothing but right. So the rationalization is complete, the sin is committed, and paradise in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, is lost. Temptation wins. Game, set, and match. But wait, we're not done yet. What about Adam? We actually read that Adam was right there all the time. She also gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate. Adam was not the unwitting stooge. Adam was there every step of the way. And the sin of Adam is the one that perhaps we are best at as individuals and as a nation. It's the sin of complicity, the sin of going along with the crowd. Where was the voice of Adam reminding his partner of the right way? Where was his hand to stop hers as she reached up to pluck the fruit? Where was his warning, his love, his concern as she bit so deeply? All we know of Adam is that he went right along with everything, silently observing until he got his turn, and then he bit too. Maybe he waited until she had a bite, waited to see if she dropped right dead, and then, nope, she's still standing, so I'll do it too. If she did it, it must be all right. What's good for the next guy is good for me. If everyone says it's okay, then what has God got to do with it? Throughout Scripture, this is how it happens. People lose sight of God, lose touch with that intimate relationship. They rationalize themselves away from the right thing, and they make their own thing all the more unbearably attractive. And once it's begun, it seems as just about everyone else just goes along. And the issue it always boils down to is lack of trust. We don't trust God to know what's best for us. We don't trust our Creator to maintain and bless His creation. We don't trust God's concept of right and wrong and good and bad. We don't trust God to make our lives full and rich and rewarding. We don't trust God that sin will eat away at us, will make us less than we are, not more. We don't trust God that living lives of compassion and love and courage and decency will be in the end a good life after all. We don't trust God that there will be a life after this one. Instead, we live as though this is it, and nothing more, and all the promises of God are empty and vain. And as anyone who suffered a broken relationship can tell you, once the trust is gone, everything else goes too, and the relationship dies. All this in this thousand-year-old story. So, do I take this story of Adam and Eve in the garden and the temptation seriously? You bet I do. As seriously as I take this old world of ours and the lack of trust so tied up in its sorrow and pain. The sorrow and pain which are outlined in the inevitable consequences of this betrayal listed in the remainder of chapter 3. And it doesn't end there. The poison stretches right on, right into chapter 4, which is where we will continue the next time. See you then.